Welcome everyone to the second session of our series of 3 webinars dedicated to digital measurement of scratch and all the new developments and recent updates for this digital measure. Today we are at the second part where we are going to be talking about updates from R&D of algorithms and tools. And just to let you know that today's session is being recorded and you will be able to find slides and recording after the session on DIME's webinar website. And in the end, we have a little Q&A. If you have a question, you can type it into the webinar chat or raise hand and just come on screen and ask the question. So today on in our presenters and panels seats, we have Wendy Smith-Begolka, Chief Strategy Officer for Research, Medical and Community Affairs at National Eczema Association, Dina Katabi, Professor at MIT and co-founder of Emerald Innovation, Jaydev Thakkar, Chief Operating Officer of Bioformis, Steve Zhu, board-certified dermatologist, physician, engineer, CEO of CyberHealth, and the Ruth K. Frankel, MD Professor at Northwestern University, Silen Zorman, Director of Digital Health Sciences at Actigraph, and our moderator is going to be Carrie Northcott, Head of Digital Sciences at Pfizer. So let's not wait any further and start with our first presentation that will be provided by Wendy. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lucy, and welcome everyone today. I really appreciate the opportunity to kick off this webinar by grounding our conversation in the lived experience of atopic dermatitis and the patient perspective. Next slide, please. And so for those of you who might be a little less familiar with atopic dermatitis, I'll give you a little bit of background on the condition here on this slide. This is a highly prevalent inflammatory skin condition with the hallmark characteristics of dry, inflamed, and typically very itchy skin. And while not life-threatening, it is often life-altering, and it is the leading contributor to skin-related disability globally, ranking 15th among all non-fatal diseases. Current estimates are that 1 in 10 individuals within the United States are affected by atopic dermatitis at some point in their lifetime across all ages and races. And while the majority often have mild disease, between 30 to 40% of children and adults often have moderate to severe disease. And again, although this is traditionally has been thought of a disease of childhood, onset can certainly occur as an adult. Disease can certainly persist from childhood well into adulthood. And some newer data actually suggests that there is a second peak of prevalence of atopic dermatitis that typically begins for older adults around the age of 60. Next slide, please. And so we at the National Eczema Association continue to learn about the breadth and dimensionality of the lived experience of atopic dermatitis from our patient community, as well as its significant heterogeneity. And NIA actually has a very robust research program that is exploring the multidimensional physical, mental, social, financial, healthcare, and quality of life impacts, and certainly many, many others that are not listed here. That are experienced by patients, but some of them are shown on this slide. But notably, this sort of circle of impact continues to grow the more we learn and inquire about the impacts of this disease on patients, and not only grow in number, but also grow in complexity. The interrelatedness of a number of these impacts is quite notable as well. And while all of these burdens are shown in this framework to be of equal weight, patients have certainly provided their perspective on what is the most problematic. Next slide, please. And so this slide actually comes from the 2019 More Than Skin Deep meeting, which was a patient-focused drug development meeting on eczema, which was led by the National Eczema Association in collaboration with 4 other patient advocacy organizations that are in the eczema space. Part of that meeting was a survey of the patient community. This is a survey of over 1,500 adults and caregivers of children that are affected by atopic dermatitis. And when they were asked to indicate the most burdensome symptoms, they placed itching and scratching right at the top by quite a significant margin, 79% in this survey, followed by red inflamed skin and sleep disturbance. And I think generally speaking throughout the meeting, we heard about the interrelatedness of sleep disturbance and itching in particular from our community. But this finding of placing itching and scratching right at the top has really been borne out repeatedly by a number of studies. Next slide, please. including this latest one from actually the DIME collaboration, many of the people that are on this line in this webinar today, which included a little over 1,200, again, adults and caregivers of children affected by atopic dermatitis, that really, again, delineated a number of different burdensome aspects of disease, but this time broke it out by the severity of disease. And I think what you can appreciate just looking very broadly across this slide is that for adults and for children, itch and scratch, again, rose to the top in a dose-dependent manner, so to speak, by severity as we look across the slide. So once again, I think we're hearing and seeing from our community in a quantitative way the importance of itch and scratch in terms of having a negative impact on their life. Next slide, please. And so to provide a little bit of a sense of why itch and scratch, sort of that broad cycle and experience, kind of rises to the top for patients, this is another way to sort of look at that information. So we can look back to this study, which came out in 2009, which actually tried to quantify the number of itch episodes that patients recalled having per day. And this is actually a smaller study. It's a little over 300 adult patients. But what you can see from this study is that, almost about 40%, which is that, darker purple portion of the pie chart there, reported having, greater than 10 itch episodes per day and scratching per day. But most importantly, you can see some of the other dimensionality around some of the characteristics of itch on the right-hand side of the slide. But what participants also more anecdotally reported is that they tended to itch and scratch more frequently at night, during the evening, and then sometimes there was some seasonal, variations to that as well. But importantly, as it relates then to the concept of measuring nocturnal itch and nocturnal scratch, these types of assessments where we're just asking patients, how many types of itch episodes they've had during the day and their severity of itch is likely going to miss what is happening when the patient is sleeping and not really able to report, and even though they're scratching potentially more frequently at night. Next slide, please. And so some of the best data that sort of we have on the patient side to be able to get at the significance of that from the patient perspective, I've put a few quotes, from the patient community, because again, this is something that they're not necessarily able to quantify themselves, but they know that it is occurring because they can see the output of this. And so to put some color around some of that more quantitative type of information, what we can glean from kind of glancing across all of these quotes is the importance of not only measuring, but alleviating, this itch and scratch cycle at night. Because what you can see is patients talk about recurring bouts of itching and scratching, not only at night, but using words like tearing or clawing at their skin, very vivid descriptions. Some of the outputs of those types of activities, the bleeding, bruising from scratching so vigorously and so hard. And I think what you can, again, appreciate just looking across all of these quotes in total is that this collectively has a tremendous emotional and significant toll on patients' lives. Next slide, please. And so given all of this, it's not surprising that when patients are asked, again, this comes from the More Than Skin Deep meeting, what the most important result that any atopic dermatitis treatment can provide for them, it is reducing the level of itching and scratching, kind of breaking that itch scratch cycle for them, comes out as the #1 treatment goal again and again, and would obviously be very incredible and meaningful for patients' lives. Next slide, please. So with that as a backdrop, given the significance of itch and understanding how patients have sort of put that particular impact in the broader constellation of all the other impacts that affect them from their disease process, it's important that when we begin to think about assessing atopic dermatitis, whether it's in clinical trials or even in the real world setting, is to remember that, again, going back to that sort of wheel of impacts, that atopic dermatitis is really largely a patient-reported disease. We don't currently have any biomarkers that are routinely utilized in clinical care for determining a prognosis type of considerations. Identifying what patient is going to work best with which, or be matched, or have the most success with which treatment, although hopefully those will be coming in the future. And we don't necessarily even have ones for diagnosis, although some are utilized a little bit infrequently. And so what that means is that to date, largely clinician-reported measures tend to predominate itch assessments or to predominate atopic dermatitis assessments. But what we're also seeing is that the use of patient-reported outcomes are starting to increase and be recognized and assessed. But in clinical trials, certainly that is occurring. But in periodic care encounters, this becomes, a little less frequent because we know that atopic dermatitis patients are typically only seeing their healthcare providers, on average about twice a year, if that. And so what this means is that there is really a tremendous opportunity to complement those sort of care setting measures with other forms of real world data that are going to provide that much more holistic understanding of what is actually happening in a patient's life. And that can come directly from patients. And as it relates to the topic that we're here talking about today, other disease tracking mechanisms. And the thought is by bringing all of this information together, we can do several things. We could use that information to improve, certainly on the patient personal perspective, kind of that self-monitoring and their own ways of measuring their disease management, hopefully utilizing that information in a shared decision-making manner with their healthcare provider to align on treatments that they might want to utilize, and ideally under having a much better understanding of both clinical trial and real-world treatment effectiveness and unmet needs. Next slide, please. So there's a couple of ways that this is already beginning to occur, and the first is through the utilization of standalone mobile health apps or mHealth apps. There's a number of them out there that are both general and disease-related or disease-specific. And Eczema-Wise is one that has been developed by the National Eczema Association. Many of you probably have some of these on your phone right now. There's actually 12 of these that are available for the eczema-specific space right now, and a number of them are utilized, have both tracking, education, and shared decision-making tools available as well. And so this is something that is starting to become more prominent in the eczema space as well, and patients are generally willing to use it. Next slide, please. There's also, as it relates to today's technology, a lot of evolution in wearable digital health, again, both general and disease related. Many of us wear a smartwatch. Most people are using a smartwatch to maintain or manage their health. And there's certainly many other sensor-based devices or other forms of technology that are also being developed. And those can also link to an mHealth app for patient information as well. And so with the last slide, please, I'll just comment that what I think this collectively means is that as we continue to look at all of these different domains for measuring the outcome assessments for atopic dermatitis, whether it's observational all the way through to behavioral, patients have a significant role to play in this AD care evolution. And there's many ways, several of which are listed on the slide here, for them to contribute to this conversation. And it's been really impactful, I think, as it relates to particularly the DIME collaborative that we're all here to participate in, that patients have been involved and hopefully will continue to be involved in this evolving conversation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy, for this important preset to our discussion. And let's move on to our technology experts who will show you their latest developments and projects. So starting with Jaydev Thakkar, CEO at Biopharmis, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Lucy. And thank you, DIME team, for having me here. I'm honored to be invited to join this discussion with an expert panel here and share about the work we've been doing in the nocturnal scratch area. Next slide, please. A bit about Biopharmis. Biopharmis has two major business verticals. One that focuses on our healthcare side of the business, enabling virtual care using remote patient monitoring and remote patient management. We have over 1,000 patients on any particular day on our platform across various disease conditions. The other business vertical focuses on life sciences and pharma, enabling digital clinical trials, digital measurement and biomarker development with a device-agnostic platform and a set of operational services. Next slide, please. Our work usually spans across drug development from early phase 1 trials to phase 3 and phase 4 trial, as well as collection of data in a real-world setting and companion solutions for approved therapies. Next slide, please. So specific to clinical trials, we provide an end-to-end platform that includes data collection through wearable sensors and EPRO into data analysis using AI and ML tools, feeding into a data lake and ultimately clinical monitoring dashboard, along with several core services surrounding the platform. With that, let's delve into the work we've been doing specifically in nocturnal scratch. So if we go to the next slide, we can move to the next slide. So, a number of partnerships with pharma companies and healthcare systems, we found an unmet need to develop a measurement tool for nocturnal scratch and sleep, and deploying it for accelerating clinical trials as well as patient's care journey. Wendy just described how material this issue has been, yet not enough objective measurement tools have been available yet. Now, as we know, bringing such a solution to market can require extensive validation and can take many years. So we took the opportunity to partner with Pfizer and leverage the Nocturnal scratch and sleep measurement algorithm that had been validated with a number of clinical trials over 5 years and significant investment, and combined it with our digital clinical trials platform and operational capabilities. Now this platform is available for any pharma to leverage while ensuring complete confidentiality and protection of the data. Next slide, please. So the algorithm is a validated tool to measure quantitatively nocturnal scratching and sleep quality in an unbiased manner, passively. We took device-agnostic approach to ensure the flexibility in device selection for many study teams as newer, improved devices continue to come to market. And it has been validated in a wide age range from 2 to 75 years. Next slide, please. So overall, there were 3 major steps. We'll start with the step 1. Oh, that's okay. I think we can jump straight to the next step there. So the first step here was the development of an algorithm using ground truth measure of thermal videography. We used polysomnography to detect sleep periods and such. 2 distinct algorithms were developed, one to measure scratching, another to measure sleep. As you can see in the figure below, it is a really nice composite. The top lines are the X, Y, and Z that takes place from the raw external data. This is matched to activity data along with arm angle data. Now the algorithm is able to identify when the participant is awake or asleep during the rest period and the total sleep opportunity. It looks at the movement and is able to identify specific scratch periods as well. This has been fairly published and is available in the public arena. Next slide, please. Next step was the validation. We started with the SQUAD study for scratch and sleep quantification and AD in collaboration with Boston University and University of Rochester. What you're seeing is the correlation between the prediction from the algorithm to the annotation that was done from the FLIR videography that took place. And you can see that it highly correlated across the predictions. This was done in participants between the age 12 to 75 and sample size of about 40 people. Another study that was done in collaboration with Boston University called Mosaic for monitoring scratch with the externality in children. And that ran algorithm on the same data, and the performance was found very similar in this age group as well. The third study focused on scratch behavior under standard of care, where we did it with over 120 participants with the age range 2 to 75 and patients that range from healthy to severe AD. Again, running this through the algorithm demonstrated a very similar performance. Next slide, please. So we talked about all of these studies. Overall, now it has been looked and validated with over 200 plus participants. The next topic, really important to understand, is what specific measurements we derived and how they are important to the patient. Next slide, please. So this is a really important area for us to collaborate, and quite a bit of work has been done in the DIME collaboration efforts leading up to this point. A number of digital measurements we looked at, including total sleep opportunity, total sleep time, and total number of scratch events and duration. It has been hypothesized up until now that more you scratch, more you are up in the sleep and your sleep quality is disturbed. Well, now with an objective measurement, we can actually count that and then we can truly understand that. Next slide, please. Another key component was, now can we modulate those numbers and measure it along with the drug intervention? So looking at the drug-mediated changes, we were able to demonstrate that albocetinib, that we can see that was a specific drug in AD, we can see that the reduction in scratch duration that occurs around 20 to 25% of the time and continues throughout the therapy duration as far as out as 175 days. It also showed improvements in sleep efficiency, which is how much they slept during the total sleep opportunity window. Now it is realized and recognized that this was done as an exploratory and was an optional endpoint and had limited participant. But overall, we could see now we've developed, validated, and confirmed that this algorithm, this tool, can measure the changes that are introduced by drug mediation. Next key question was, patients, would they wear it? Is this something that's valuable to them? Yeah, please, let's go to the next slide. As you can see from the 2 of the studies, one in adults and one done in children, majority of them felt that that was comfortable and they would like to wear this. Next slide, please. So this slide really captures why we are so excited about licensing this work and making it available to everyone in the industry. As you can see, from the overall validation journey and the roadmap, several years could have been taken. and the work that has been already done by Pfizer is cutting down quite a bit of work through the building blocks that have been now made available. And any particular drug that would like to leverage this can start with therapeutic studies. This can truly accelerate the drug development timeline and reduce cost. And a good chunk of this work has been done with the work done at the DEEP consortium and how we can leverage this building block to further advance the work at an accelerated pace. Next slide, please. Another great power of our solution has been, as I mentioned earlier, staying with a device agnostic approach. Devices will continue to mature, new devices and innovation continue to become available. So the algorithm has been validated and decoupled from any one particular device through multiple devices being validated, and no specific device dependency is introduced through the drug development journey. Next slide, please. So now it's not just about the algorithm. It's really important that we provide a holistic solution, and Wendy described a number of things that potentially needs to come together. Biopharmist provides, I think maybe we can go one slide earlier. Biopharmist provides a suite of services that go around from ePROs to smart notification to education material, a connectivity tool from a two-way video chat to audio chat, as well as the wearable agnostic platform. And all of this come together to provide patient and holistic experience. Next slide, please. We also take care of the device logistics and in shipping, remote patient onboarding, as well as training patients remotely, making sure that the burden on site and patient remains minimal. Next slide, please. Now, overall Biopharmist vision includes not only providing this robust platform for clinical trials that has integrated nocturnal scratch and sleep measurement biomarkers, but to also consider providing a companion solution for optimizing an AD patient's journey to the right treatment in the clinical care journey. Next slide, please. So here is a brief sneak peek of what a companion app could look like. It has a solution that can include a scratch dial that allows you to either provide this feedback in a clinical trial journey, or we can hide it in a clinical trial platform and make it available in a clinical care setting, how the scratch settings have been, something they can take it in their conversation in a follow-up care journey. Also, this allows us to provide a customizable solution. Next slide. And I believe this was the last slide. So thank you again for listening and giving me an opportunity to share our exciting work in this area.
Thank you very much, Jade, for amazing presentation. And let's move on now to Sylvain Zerman at Actigraph to talk about the Decode Nocturnal Scratch project.
Hi, you hear me, Lucy? So let's start with the first slide. So hi, I'm Sylvain Zerman, Director of Digital Science, and I want to present today Decode Nocturnal Scratch, which is a consortium that Actigraph is leading. And this consortium is following the work done by DIME that has demonstrated the need for nocturnal scratch measure. And so Actigraph launched, following the DIME consortium, a consortium named Decode to deliver this fit-for-purpose measure to drug development. So next slide, slide number 2. Yeah, thank you. So Wendy stole my thunder here, but like you should go and have a look at the More Than Skin Deep report, which was published in 2018, I believe, and it's a FDA patient-focused drug development initiative. So I won't go too deep into those quotes. Some of them are the same as Wendy's, but some of the things I want to share is, first, in this report, there's kind of a mix between, like it's kind of confusing how hitch is the same, it appears to be the same thing as scratch. So I think there's some learnings to be done on distinguishing each, the feeling with scratch, the behavior. And the second aspect, if we look at actually quotes from the patient, there's really interesting things that emphasizes that nocturnal scratch is really something specific, a symptom on its own right, and it's core to the disease activity. And just some few points related to nocturnal scratch. First, scratch in itself is part of the eat scratch cycle, where a patient would scratch themselves, deteriorate their skin, leading to further irritation, itch, and then itch, and itch is leading to scratch. So this cycle that is at the heart of the atopic dermatitis disease. The second aspect is that the nocturnal scratch is not the same thing as daytime scratch, because, and we can see that, like I highlighted in green in those codes, is that during daytime, the patient could trick his mind away from the itch and control the scratching behavior. But during nighttime, because the scratching is unconscious, the patient would just scratch. And so they say they are scratching unconsciously. So that's one thing. And then unless some parents are holding the hand of the child, like in the quote 5 and 6, then the patient will scratch, even if not knowing. And this is something very important, because it means that with nocturnal scratch, we are measuring something that is directly linked to the disease activity, and that is not masked in some way by the motivation or the ability of the patient to control its scratching. And the last point that is also present in both quotes is how much the scratch, the nocturnal scratch, is actually impacting the sleep of the patient and the caregiver. So the patient are waking up every hours because of the scratch. And then the caregiver might have to sleep with the kid to hold their hand during all night. And so losing hours of sleep every week. And this, of course, is having a huge impact on the quality of life of the patient and the caregiver. So for a while, there were no proper technology to capture nocturnal scratch. And so there were not such a focus on nocturnal scratch. But can you go next slide? But then actually, researchers have been trying to capture nocturnal scratch for a very long time. The first paper on nocturnal scratch I found was like from a Scottish researcher in the 70s that used like a self-winding watch to actually capture scratch. So the movement will wind the watch, and that would be a proxy to the amount of scratching. Of course, it's probably not very sensitive, accurate, and specific, but I think it's quite interesting that even after 50 years, we still are using watches to progress toward the measure of nocturnal scratch. Later on, a bunch of other technology have been developed for measuring nocturnal scratch, including gluing sensors to the nail of the patient to capture the scratch at the closest of where scratch is happening, or putting sensors under the bed, under the mattress to capture like the vibration resulting from the scratch. Video recording, which is still done today because it's considered as the gold standard for measuring scratch behavior, or using sonar or electromagnetic waves or other ways to capture this movement. But I think in the last 5 years or so, there has been a lot of work performed on wrist actigraphy sensor, and and at the bottom right, we see a trace, like the oscillation. This is like the acceleration related to the scratching behavior. And we can train a machine learning algorithm to detect those very small events during the night, so that we can quantify the amount of scratch with high sensitivity, accuracy, with low burden for the patient, and something that is scalable in a clinical development program. Next slide. And there has been many pharmaceutical companies who've developed their own technology, at least those are the public one, on nocturnal scratch based on wrist actigraphy. And I think one of the challenges with pharmaceutical company developing their own algorithm is that it's hard to disseminate. And I think the most often the return on investment is relatively low. And so that's why I think there's a push toward more consortium approach to that. And DIME led a consortium on nocturnal scratch that demonstrated the meaningfulness, but also defined actually what was nocturnal scratch, and showed the appetite from payers, regulators, and KOL on regarding this measure. But this work by DIME was technology agnostic and did not deliver any technology to actually capture the nocturnal scratch behavior from the patient. And that's why actigraphy launched in 2023 Decode Nocturnal Scratch, which is a consortium approach to delivering a fit-for-purpose technology to measuring nocturnal scratch. Next slide. And so in this consortium, there's 3 work streams. One is around conducting an analytical validation study with about 60 participants with atopic dermatitis or psoriasis, with adolescents and adults. And we are comparing wrist actigraphy-based detection of nocturnal scratch with the video camera recording. There's also health authority engagement, and we are also performing usability and recommendation to maximize compliance from the patient to get the highest quality data. Regarding the timeline, the consortium was launched in Q4 of last year with 4 partners, J&J, Takeda, and UCB, including them. And we got first patient in earlier this month, and this work will be completed by the end of Q2 2025. Next slide. And overall, at Actigraph, we believe that this consortium approach is the best way to maximize the value for the sponsor on those measures, and also to move the needle on the adoption of digital health technology in clinical development. One reason is that we can reach a critical mass through those consortium and build a consensus, facilitate dissemination around the pharma sponsor, and also reduce costs, because instead of having every single sponsor conducting their own validation study, we can do it once for all. There will be also an evidence file to demonstrate the fit for purpose characteristic of this technology. And we are also engaging with regulators to reduce the regulatory barrier to acceptance of the measure and the technology. And last slide, next slide. So I just want to thank all the partners that are part of Decode and made it happen, and also DIME for organizing this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvain, and good luck on Decode. We are excited to see what's going to come out of the project of this amazing consortium. And with this, let's move on to our next presenters, and that's going to be Steve Zhu at Cybel Health. And I will stop sharing my screen and going to go to Steve and his screen. So, the floor is yours.
Let's see if the transition worked. We're looking okay there? Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, all works.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you so much for the invitation. I'll jump right in with another scratch monitoring technology. So I think it's really exciting to kind of see, as a dermatologist myself who's taken care of a lot of patients with atopic dermatitis, the kind of interest in itch monitoring and scratch monitoring. And I always think about the global scale of opportunities and technologies that can do it. And to measure itch, there's a lot of ways. You can ask patients, you can look at the appearance of the skin, both of which are very important. But measuring scratch is a great opportunity because it's a natural reflex to itch. And you'll hear about some ways to do it. You heard about 2 great risk-based solutions. We'll talk about a wearable that we've developed, and you'll hear from Professor Gatabi very soon on a non-contactless way. We do advanced wearable sensors, and I think one of the things that we do is think about when a patch-like solution can address certain opportunities in monitoring where enhanced accuracy might be needed. And the device we have is called Atom. Basically, how it's a little different is it measures both the acoustic as well as the motion associated with scratching. It's also hand-mounted, which I'll make an argument why, and kind of enabling you to kind of measure all the different aspects of scratching. Some individuals only scratch with their fingers, some with their whole arm and elbow. So a hand-mounted solution does that. And with acoustics, you can actually capture more specifically the motion of scratching. So our sensor is not tricked if you scratch like this in the air. That's not really scratching, it's just scratching motion. But with the acoustic, you'll actually be able to measure scratching when it hits tissue. I think that's kind of unique. And it also has haptic feedback, which I think is an opportunity to kind of move down the pathway of actually therapeutics. And we'll talk a little bit about how that works in our terms of our work. So pretty simple, right? When you scratch, it calculates scratch with an AI algorithm. And when you just do the motion, it doesn't. And like JDev talked about, we validated it in both adults and pediatric patients against infrared camera, which is manually labeled. I like to joke, I've got a lot of dedicated medical students that really want to be dermatologists, watching thousands of hours of these and coding it. That's the only way to kind of get to that gold standard, but very proud of those results, validated in both adults and pediatric patients. I think ontology is really important. So I give Dime so much credit and all the work Lucy led and thinking about how definitions and words matter for Scratch. Many ways to talk about Scratch. Is it an event? Is it episodes? Is it duration? Is it time? And I think these things matter a lot because in our work, we're really sort of thinking about deeply, what does scratching mean, right? We kind of all understand it, but that specificity is really important. I think nocturnal scratch, undeniably important. We all can agree on that. I think the fantastic presentation that went on first, how that's important, very high up as a clinician of what my patients care about. But one of the things we've done is think about, yes, nocturnal scratch, incredibly important, but what else more about scratch should we explore? And that's one of the things we actually recently did, some new data that we're very happy to present here in this Dime workshop. And that's working collaboratively with the Food and Drug Administration. There was an interest to go beyond nocturnal scratch to understand that a little bit more. So we did a survey with 72 patients, kind of that patient-driven approach, and we expanded beyond nocturnal scratch to ask about things like intensity, things like events versus duration, both awake and not awake, to kind of understand what patients really cared about. So we got a lot of great responses, and I think it was interesting because some of the earlier data showed that AD patients care about both. They do care about scratching. They care about daytime scratching a little bit less than nocturnal, but both were quite important. So I think that was kind of interesting for some of these results to kind of bring in more of the concept of scratching besides nocturnal. And then we asked them actually to grade or rank intensity, episodes, and duration in terms of what they were most bothered by, both awake and at night. And it was sort of interesting that it was really clear that scratch intensity actually came up on top. That was the number one thing they cared about, followed by episodes, followed by total scratch time. When they were asleep, again, scratch intensity was the most important, ranked the highest, followed by episodes, followed by total scratch time. And then when we asked them about preferred medical treatments targeting scratch intensity, was the number one thing again, followed by episodes, followed by scratch time. So I think it really reveals that scratch has many different definitions. The ontology matters, how you present that to patients. There's clear preferences that come out into what patients value the most. And I think that was really interesting for us as a technology developer, and certainly for me as a dermatologist. The most meaningful scratch measurement overall, again, scratch intensity won out over scratch episodes and scratch time. And I think for us, as we think about technology, we are evolving beyond nocturnal scratch events or episodes into going into things that matter most to patients. And I think if I think about it as a clinician, intensity really equates more closely to skin damage, right? We have patients that might gently rub or scratch, and that sort of soothes, doesn't cause much damage to the skin. It's when people really go aggressively for a long time. And so it kind of makes sense as we think about it more and more. Fortunately, we have the ability to quantify intensity by force with a hand-mounted sensor. So excited to kind of publish those results very soon to be able to expand beyond just nocturnal scratch. And like everybody else, we're very into validation and scientific publications. We've done more than 2,000 hours total, 80 patients, both pediatric and adult, and really excited about that. We're working with the FDA through the Drug Development Tool Program. The device is already CE marked Class 1. We're also going to be seeking 510K, expecting that by the end of the year, but then hopefully DDT fully qualified, probably Q2 of next year. So very excited to work collaboratively with the FDA on this novel digital endpoint, proving its work, and we're kind of in the second stage and proud to be a part of this. So as we evolve, did nocturnal scratch, very, very important. Many ways to kind of look at that, as you've seen. We've done daytime scratching as well, and I think creating that more accurate measurement of all the confounders. And now we're actually moving into biofeedback, where we actually can vibrate and sense scratching to get people to stop, which I think is an opportunity for therapeutics in the future. And like JDev said, it's really about getting these systems to patients, allowing them to use it efficiently to be able to support it. So in conclusion, I think itch and scratch are teaching me new things as we talk to patients. The perception, the behavior, and the appearance all matter. Scratching can be defined with a range of tools, wearables, non-contact, or wearables being the most common. I think they care about the entire spectrum. It's not just duration, it's episodes, it's intensity, it's both daytime and nighttime. So technologies that can cover each of these things, I think, are quite important. And then ultimately, validation and proof matters the most. So I'll hand that back to the moderators, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Steve. And this is an amazing innovation. We're looking forward where it's going to lead for you and the rest of the field. And our last presentation is going to be from Dina Katabi, who is working on another type of sensor. So let's hear more about that. Dina, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lucy, and everyone. So hi, everyone. So we had amazing presentations, and what you're gonna hear from me is like one step further along the same axis. So everything that we heard so far requires devices that are form of wearables. So we are motivated by this question: can we actually measure scratching and sleep, but completely in a contactless manner without asking people to wear sensors on their body? And one reason why you might want to do this is, of course, we know like clinical trials, for example, in atopic dermatitis, they are typically 12 weeks, so 3 months. So having people wearing something, particularly like on the skin that is potentially damaged and sensitive, could be difficult for some of those people. Also, people, in many cases, they don't scratch using their hand. They scratch body parts against the bed sheet or against each other. So being able to capture that form of scratching as well, even when people don't use their hand to scratch. So how can we do that? So the idea is to take a device very much similar to your Wi-Fi box at home, but this device has neural networks internally, and it can analyze the radio signal as it bounces off the person's body as they are like during nighttime, and to measure scratching. And also it can measure sleep, not just scratching, and a variety of other measures such as vital signs and motor symptoms. This actually, as I said, is enabled by neural networks that analyze these radio signals that bounce off people's body and are completely touchless. We call this device the Emerald device. So here I'm showing you an example of a person. So when he moves, you can see that it says movement. When he's not scratching, it says not scratching. But when he moves his arm to scratch, the classifier says scratching. And he's not wearing any device on himself. It's purely like these movement and the scratching movement being recognized from the wireless signal. And we did these experiments at the beginning in the lab with control individuals, healthy individuals, and it shows very high accuracy, both on the precision and the recall. And then we decided we are going to take them from the lab out to in clinical trial, and I'm going to show you later the clinical trial studies. But we also can monitor sleep. So when you go to sleep, your brain waves change and you enter different stages: awake, light sleep, deep sleep, and REM, rapid eye movements. So sleep is not just about awake versus asleep. What we really would like to do is to be able to understand also the different sleep stages accurately, because particularly these sleep stages have different contribution to your health. So REM is more related to emotional health, for example. Deep sleep is related, like you see impairment in deep sleep, for example, in Alzheimer and in cognition. So if you want to understand sleep at this level, you typically send someone to a sleep lab. They put electrode on their head and body, and they ask them to sleep like this. So this is something called PSG, and of course, it's very difficult to assess sleep this way and assume that the person is going to have a normal sleep. But let me show you. So this is our device. As I said, we transmit very low power wireless signal, 1,000 times lower than your Wi-Fi, analyze it with AI, and generate exactly what you get in a sleep lab. So this graph that you see is something called the hypnogram. And for every 30 seconds, it tells you whether this person is light sleep, deep sleep, REM, etc. Now, everything that we do, of course, we compare to the gold standard. And so I'm just gonna show you some of the, like an example that shows you, like here, you see a hypnogram. You see the gold standard in blue at the top, the gold standard in green at the bottom, and our wireless emerald device at the top in blue. And as you can see, the whole hypnogram with the sleep architecture is preserved. And this is just one example. Of course, it's validated against the PSG in about 890 individuals. And we also look at issues like the accuracy for Black skin, for example, or Black people, like dark skinned people versus white individual in males versus females, young versus old, so that you ensure that you have equity across the whole spectrum. Now, these devices are not just in the lab. In fact, for the last 3 years, they have been used in very widely in a variety of disease area by big pharma as well as biotech, including Parkinson, Alzheimer, rare diseases, lupus, Crohn, etc. But here I'm going to talk a bit about atopic dermatitis. So so over the last couple of years, these devices, as I said, are started being used actively in atopic dermatitis. We started with Sanofi, and unfortunately, I cannot show you the results today from that trial, but it's in a pediatric population, and very soon we are going to publish these results with Sanofi together. We also have been funded by the FDA to take that technology in a pediatric population and move it to analytical validations. And there are a variety of ongoing clinical trials with that use these wireless devices completely contactless in adult population, but they are under CDA, so cannot report them to you. But let me show you results from one observational trial with Dr. Brian Kim. And here we monitored patients who have AD, PN, and CPUO. And these are patients that are adults that have moderate to severe disease. And we monitor them for 4 weeks in their homes. And we compared the results to cameras, video cameras, and we were looking both at the scratching, whether it's accurate in comparison to the camera, and also we wanted to look at the impact of scratching on sleep. So let me show you these results. So here the first graph you see on the x-axis, the scratching from like as it's measured by the camera with human looking at those events and scoring them. And on the y-axis, the scratching as measured completely contactless using a wireless device, our Emerald device. And each dot here is 1 night of scratching from 20 patients. So we have over 270 nights. And as you can see, it's very accurate. The correlation is very high. The p-value is very low. You can look at it in a different way. You can look at the ROC curve where you put sensitivity and specificity. And as you can see, very high AUC for measuring scratching using wireless signals. We also, as I said, because we have the same device that can measure scratching and sleep completely passively, we can look at the impact of scratching on sleep. And as you can see here, on the x-axis is scratching, on the y-axis is sleep efficiency. And you can see that sleep efficiency degrades the more scratching the person has. And here another metric of sleep, where on the x-axis you see scratching before sleep onset, on the y-axis is sleep latency. And as you can see, like the more the person is scratching, the harder it is to fall asleep, and therefore the sleep latency increases with more scratching. Of course, it's very important to use these, like in the context of pharma and biotech, is to use these to be able in clinical trial to check treatment efficacy. And here I'm showing like a fairly simple example of 1 dose of Dupixent. And you can see in red the pre-dose, the pre-treatment, and the green is after just taking 1 dose of Dupixent. On the y-axis is the scratching per hour of sleep. And you can see that just 1 dose was very effective. You can immediately see a reduction in scratching, in nocturnal scratching in the patient. I want to end with a disclosure. I mean, of course, I work with many pharma companies, and also I am a co-founder of Emerald Innovations, which produces these Emerald wireless devices that monitor physiological signals. Thank you very much. I will stop here.
Hey everyone, if I could ask all the panelists to come back on camera, I'd really appreciate it. And thank you, by the way, Wendy and all of the speakers. You did a phenomenal job. And as per usual, we ran a little over on everything. But with that said, I've got 7 minutes, actually really about 5, so Lucy can close up. But I did want to take a second, bring y'all back on camera and ask at least one question, if not 2, if I can sneak it in. Thanks again for the great chats. I think you guys all highlighted some of the great work that's been done both within the regulatory operations and patients. But I kind of want to just start out. Wendy, you did a great job of bringing in the patient impact. How did you all think about the patient as you worked in this technology moving forward? I know, Steve, you talked about how some of the great work that you've been doing, I'm calling you out on this one, surveying the patients. Jada, have you looked at wearability? Are there any additional steps we should take, or just talk about the general importance of talking to patients?
Well, I think that for me, from a clinician perspective, it's like every sort of survey and things where you ask AD patients, like itch and scratch is always at the top of the list, right? As well as sleep. But I think what I learned is, you just got to go deeper, right? And that's why I really appreciate kind of Dime's dedicated work on the initial effort around ontology and frameworks and definitions, because that's where we take those things that are important to patients and then turn them into outcomes, right? Measurements, technologies that then can be put in front of a regulator that leads to correct levels of clinical validation, acceptance. So I think was where there's certain times where, it's very easy for us as developers or even clinicians to make certain kind of leaps of judgment, right? Or leaps of understanding that when you really sort of dig deeper and sort of change that into like specifics, that you learn new things. And that's what happened with us when we thought about scratch intensity.
That's awesome. It's been great to see the involvement of patients' voice throughout all of these and the thinking of the patients with the wireless, with the wearability with that. It's been wonderful to see. The last webinar, we talked a little bit about some of the regulatory feedback, both from the FDA and EMA. I thought it was a phenomenal session. How has that impacted some of the work you're doing? Has it provided any thought processes as you move forward with this work?
Who are you asking, Carrie?
Any of you, yeah, please, Dina. I can start calling out names if you really want me to.
Yeah, so actually it is very, very helpful. It has been very helpful for us because, as I mentioned, we have been funded by the FDA to take the technology to the next level, particularly, and we are now working on focusing on that. And being able to communicate with the FDA, like understand from them what matters, what doesn't matter, what the process, and walk with them toward that process and along the path has been amazingly helpful, from things that are simple about like the design of the clinical trial, what things to collect, what things not collect, and what is realistic. Like, okay, so if you do something and you put certain constraint, how is it going to affect recruitment? What is the reaction of the parents and stuff like that? So that was very, very helpful. So I think talking to the FDA and making sure that they are involved I found it very, very helpful to make the process much smoother.
Any thoughts on the deep EMA work, Sylvan, Jada?
No, so I think it's related to also what Dime did. I think it's important that we disseminate the information so that we can build on what others have done, and we can actually progress towards something that will be relatively easy to get acceptance by the regulators. And I think that's quite unique in this community and in the recent history of Nocturnal Scratch. And I think this is the way to go.
Sorry, Kerry, I'll comment. I think the work Deep is doing is quite extraordinary and transformative. If you look at time it takes to build new algorithms and markers, and for every drug, every condition, if you needed to start from the scratch, it will take many years and put the industry far behind. Using as a building block what has been done and building on top of it allows all of us and the patients that we are trying to serve for us to bring these novel solutions much faster, still validated rigorously, but building upon each other. So I think it's quite transformative, and I remain very excited for the next 5 years of how much we can bring to the industry and patient, leveraging such frameworks.
I know I've only got 1 minute left, but I wanted to ask, and this one was in the chat. Someone asked about the compliance of wearing the various sensors. I wanted to get a take, and I'm going to let you all speak individually. And I'd love Wendy's take on this too. Really what you're seeing with regards to compliance with the wearability of these different types of devices, because we've covered all different types from wristwatch to hand to just completely going wireless. So have you seen compliance be successful with these different, with this patient population? I'll start with Sylvan because you're my bottom right.
Yeah, so I think with compliance, there's two aspects. Like, is the patient somehow motivated and to wearing this? And there, I think explaining what we're doing, why we're doing it, and this how scratch is different from each, and sleep, how it could measure sleep. Like making it meaningful for the patient is something critical. And then there's also good practice on drug development, on how to implement a device to actually reduce compliance, and making sure we provide the right reminder to the patient and mitigation plan if the compliance is not there. So I think there's not like one simple solution that just solve that. I think you need to tackle it from all angles.
Yeah,
Right, I'm right. Oh, go ahead,
I've
please.
noticed the compliance to be quite varying, different between a clinical trial journey versus clinical care journey. To Sylvian's point, the motivations are somewhat different. The patients participating in trials are a little bit willing to do more, but in a real care journey, you ask them to put on a patch every night or multiple devices, it starts to very quickly become burdensome and compliance falls through. So I think being very mindful that in a normal day of living, what they're willing to wear, and if you design it that way, you could get much higher compliance. Otherwise, it's really something you have to be sensitive to. Form factor is critical.
I wanted, Lucy, I'm gonna give me 1 second. I just wanted to end it with Wendy. What were your thoughts of everything? Do you like the idea of everything coming forward and the progress that you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, just to commend all of the other speakers. I mean, this is, truly amazing progress on something that's incredibly important to patients. And I will just, echo the comments about that there is a difference between the clinical trial and the real world. At the end of the day, what patients really want is to forget that they have atopic dermatitis. And so as much as we can assess the remaining unmet needs and burdens of disease while still giving them the freedom to go about living their best lives, that's really what the goal is. And so thank you to all of you for your efforts to help us get closer to that end goal.
Can't wrap it up any greater than that. Thank you, Wendy. And Lucy, I'll let you finish with a few seconds.
Thank you very much, Carrie, Wendy, all the panelists. This has been an amazing session, and I know that we all have much to talk about, and we hope that we had more time, but unfortunately our time is up. We will continue next week at the same time on Tuesday, talking about the processes and frameworks that exist in place to help with validation and adoption of the measure. So kind of building on this and the previous session, what happens when we go forward, and how think about the validation, especially clinical validation of the measure, what has been done and what still can be done and how. So thank you very much. Join us next week. Thanks to all of the panelists for finding the time and presenting their amazing research and innovation. And we wish you all the best luck and hope to hear more from your efforts. Thank you and goodbye.